Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode with the Crime and Coffee Couple. My name's Allison.
And my name is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Alejandro. How are you? That's not actually her full name. Her full name is Allison.
It is. Thank you for that clarification.
Right.
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm good. You should we tell our audience about one of the most criminal things you've done today? Do you remember?
No, I have no idea.
So we were at our son's baseball game, and my wife was talking to my daughter, and she started singing Pink Pony Club to my daughter. And what did our daughter say?
So we were driving home. We drive separate, and we were singing Pink Pony Club. I'm going to keep on dancing, blah, blah, blah. And our daughter said, do not dare sing that in front of Dad. And because when we do, we've noticed it gets stuck in his head, and he will sing it no less than 545 times. So I was putting my sunglasses away, and I wasn't thinking, and it came out of my mouth. And in my head, I was like, crap. But I was like, maybe he didn't hear it.
And then we're in the bathroom together, just kind of getting ready before the big show. And I just started singing Pink Pony Club. And then you're like, oh, no. And you told me the story.
And I went back and told our daughter, I was like, I have to confess something. I accidentally sang it in front of Dad.
Yeah. So because I have to sing it in my head, I love the song. I think Chapel Roan's awesome. And it's all that's going on in my head. So in the background, instead of it's Pink Pony Club, I'm going to keep on dancing at the pink. It's a good song.
So I think we should talk about our mugs. If you're watching on YouTube, for my birthday, my bestie got us some mugs that say Ma and Pa.
Because we are Ma and Pa. We're just a singular podcast. We're not in some huge podcast network like some of the big wigs out there. Not yet, at least. I mean, people are like, oh, would you sell out? It's like, yeah, absolutely, we would sell out.
But we
for
would
now,
still stay humble and kind.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're just Ma and Pa. We're just trying to make things work for our, in our lives here. But you guys subscribing to our show via Patreon or via Apple subscriptions, it really helps us out. So thanks to Lauren for these sweet little mugs. And if you're noticing on the video, Allison colored her hair.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I'm now officially a brunette again.
Which you kind of always, what'd you do? Like you had some blonde in your hair, like streaks or whatever they call them?
Yeah, I had some highlights, but they were starting to overtake. I was born naturally very, very blonde. And then over time, my hair just darkened, and I just prefer the way that I look with darker hair. My mom's always like, I like you as a blonde.
I like how it brings out your lighter eyes and everything. Kinda like lights up your face a little bit.
Oh, thank you. Whereas, I feel like the blonde kind of washes me out.
I would agree. I would agree. And then like she came home and I'm like, it's like a new woman. How you doing, girlfriend? And like, it's like a new wife. Like we've been together, almost 30 years here since like high school. So, things get pretty boring pretty quick. So,
let's just say there's no butterflies going on here.
Not at all. Haven't seen butterflies.
Deceased.
Yeah. If anything, there's bugs, like just tiny little bugs.
I think maggots.
Yeah,
probably.
maggots. But maybe they'll turn into butterflies someday.
They might.
Who knows?
They might.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention I'm reading a book right now. I try to alternate fiction with self-help, and I'm reading Gentle, Rest More, Stress Less, and Live the Life You Actually Want. It's by Courtney Carver, and it's just one of those books that it's telling you things you already know, but it's just a nice, friendly little nudge or reminder. I'm somebody, and I know we've talked about it on this podcast, that I try to be overly productive to the point that it's absurd, and I want to fill every second of my time.
It's crazy. Like I was transferring video from one of the memory cards on the computer, and she's like, I think I can go take a shower. Okay. And it's like 8 minutes. It's like, okay. And God bless you, because you get a lot of stuff done.
But at the same time, you need a little bit of downtime to rest and rejuvenate and actually focus and not just be spinning from one thing to the next. And obviously there's different seasons of life, your life when you have a baby or an infant. You are just in the trenches. We have teenagers and we're living at baseball fields right now. There's no free time. You do the best that you can, even if it's setting aside a half hour of your time to just decompress. It just little tips like that. So if you're looking to, get a little extra time to yourself, it's a good book to read.
You'd recommend it?
I would. Yeah, I'm like halfway through.
It's not an advertisement. We'll tell you when there's ads. So.
No, but it's an Amazon addiction. We'll link it that way.
Yeah, check out our Amazon addiction. Things that we mentioned here, we put on Amazon. And if you buy them, then we get like a little commission. So thanks. That's another way to support us. If you're going to be buying stuff on Amazon anyways, just click our link first and then we'll get a little piece of it. You know what I'm saying?
So on that note, are you ready to jump into this?
Yes.
All right, so this is the murder of Ruthie McCoy. So 52-year-old Ruthie McCoy, she had struggled with her mental health since she was in her 20s, and it really wasn't unusual for her to mutter to herself or curse at passing strangers on the street. However, after she had begun receiving treatment at a local psychiatric center, she did seem to be progressing at a truly amazing pace. Ruthie often voiced concern about the place that she called home for the past 4 years, and this is a high-rise building on Chicago's near west side. She lived in one of 7 15-story brown Y-shaped towers within the Grace Abbott homes. So the buildings were terribly dark and dangerous, and they featured malfunctioning elevators, pitch black stairwells that were teeming with addicts and criminals. Ruthie's home at the end of a corridor on the 11th floor was the kind of place that you didn't host happy get-togethers. You weren't having potlucks and barbecues, and you would be foolish if you were not always looking over your shoulder. And that's really sad.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It really does. So when Ruthie dialed 911 on the night of Wednesday, April 22nd, 1987, the call came through at 8:45 p.m. And she told the dispatcher, "I'm a resident at 1440 West 13th Street, apartment 1109. And some people next door are totally tearing this down, you know?" And in a frantic voice, she went on to explain that someone was trying to come through her bathroom. I will tell you, it was a confusing call for the dispatcher, and Ruthie's story became the inspiration for the 1992 horror film Candyman. And this is about a graduate student from the University of Illinois, Chicago, who was researching urban legends and began to look into someone known as Candyman. And it was a spirit who kills anyone who speaks his name 5 times while standing in front of the mirror.
Did we see that?
No, you're thinking of the one where it's like candy cane.
Yeah,
no, I never saw Candyman.
Okay.
So sadly, in Ruthie's case, her fate was not fiction. Instead, it was a horrifying reality. This actually happened to a person. So since 1983, Ruthie had been living in Chicago's ABLA homes. So ABLA, it's an acronym for the names of the 4 different housing developments that totaled 3,596 units. And this comprised Adams, Brooks, Loomis, and Abbott. So these were part of the Chicago Housing Authority, or CHA, and this spanned from Cabrini Street on the north end to 15th Street on the south end, and from Blue Island Avenue on the east end to Ashland Avenue on the west. And I will tell you, if you're new to this podcast, Mike and I are from Chicago.
Chicagoland area.
Yeah, and we're from the outskirts, the suburbs. And I always remember because we are huge Sox fans, and we would go to Comiskey Park where the Sox play, and that was outside of Cabrini Green. And that was a notorious place that, you just knew if you went there, you might not come out because there was a lot of violence.
When they were building the new park that they have there, they had some bullet holes in the stadium in the seats. So there was stray bullet holes from the place. It's a bad area.
So the Grace Abbott homes where Ruthie lived was the 4th installation of the ABLA housing project, with construction starting in 1952 and ending in 1955 as an all African-American project that was named after, Grace Abbott. And this is a social worker who is an advocate in advancing child welfare and defending the rights of Eastern European immigrants. So initially, residents within the community, they were fairly safe. It was pretty well protected. And the reason for that was because they were screened before they were allowed to move in. Gang activity was present, but it was not yet running rampant at this point in time. However, by the mid-1960s, though, the Chicago Housing Authority stopped taking precautions when they were screening new tenants, and the project soon fell into violent crime and heavy gang activity. Budget cuts meant that the buildings began to fall into disrepair because they didn't have enough people there to fix things. And then the high-rises especially, they became heavily polluted with trash and graffiti. So at the time of this case in 1987, Abbott Homes was a place that Ruthie and about 3,600 other people called home. A lucky 580 of these residents, they lived in 33 2-story row houses. That seemed to be a safer bet versus the others that were spread between 7 high-rises, Ruthie included. So the majority of the residents were African American and under age 18, with the average income per family being $4,527 per year, which breaks down to, in 2025, $12,744.
Not much.
Not much. So Abbott Homes was a significantly more violent area than the infamous Cabrini Green. If you're from Chicago, you probably know Cabrini Green.
As soon as you said Cabrini Street, I'm like, oh, Cabrini Green. That's
Right.
where everybody thought the most gang activity was. So this was more dangerous
More
than that?
dangerous. So Cabrini Green was also a CHA development that was situated not far from the affluent Gold Coast area. So we're talking about heavily violent crime to the richest of the rich of Chicago, living quite near each other.
Not that close. I mean,
It was pretty close to the lakefront and then downtown.
yeah, driving distance for sure.
So Abbott Homes was laid out in a way that made it perfect to facilitate crime and house gangs. Of course, when it was designed, that was not the case.
No, I imagine they're like, let's see how gang members can really get together here and plan all sorts of good stuff.
So there were super blocks of high rises that sat a distance from the streets and promoted anonymous living where addiction really began to run rampant. So residents of these homes and apartments were more than twice as likely to be beaten, raped, and murdered as they would be citywide, and the Abbott high-rises where Ruthie lived was especially violent. The corridors were completely enclosed. The light bulbs either burned out, they were broken or stolen, which made the area even dark during the day, let alone forget it, at nighttime they were pitch dark.
I mean, the only time I've ever seen these places is in videos, and it's like people almost look like they're caged animals. Like there was no place to see fresh air because they didn't want things being thrown over the buildings and everything. And it's just like, it was almost like they were just rats in a cage. It was so sad.
It really is very sad. So that I think was in Cabrini Green. They enclosed all the balconies with cages because people were throwing garbage and, furniture and things like that over. So there was a lack of janitors and supplies. And, if a vacant unit wasn't boarded up, drug dealers would find a way into the unit. They would kick in the whole door frame sometimes. Unboarded units would be stripped of anything of value. I mean, just anything would be taken. Sinks, cabinets, doorknobs, and light bulbs. They would quickly be whisked away, probably sold off somewhere so that it could potentially be used for drug money. So 42 of the 148 units were vacant in the building where Ruthie lived because supplies and time were lacking to make them habitable again, because as quickly as somebody would move out, everything would be stripped from the inside and they couldn't get around to fixing them to have a new family move in. So as the dispatcher ended the call with Ruthie on the night of Wednesday, April 22nd, 1987, a patrol car was sent on its way. However, rather than being labeled as a break-in attempt, the patrolman was incorrectly told that they were answering a disturbance with a neighbor call. So with that, there wasn't as much of a sense of urgency had it been labeled properly. So Ruthie told the dispatcher, they throwed the cabinet down. And she elaborated that she was living in the projects in Chicago and said, you can reach my bathroom. They want to come through my bathroom. So because the call had been mislabeled as a disturbance, it took police longer than it should have. So before officers could arrive, now a second 911 call came through, and this came through at 9:04 p.m., 19 minutes after Ruthie had called. And this time the caller reported hearing gunshots and yelling coming from Unit 1109, the very unit where Ruthie had placed her call. So at approximately 9:10 p.m., 4 officers arrived at Ruthie's apartment and they began pounding on the door. They were announcing their presence as being police. So because they were met with nothing but silence, they contacted the dispatcher and asked her to call Ruthie, thinking maybe somebody could be in there with her hiding. So the officers are standing outside Ruthie's apartment door and they could hear the endless ringing of the dispatcher calling her line. So meanwhile, 2 officers downstairs headed to the project office 1 block away in order to get a key for Unit 1109. However, the key they were given didn't end up fitting Ruthie's lock. So now officers are standing out in her hallway debating what they're going to do next. And they found no help from Ruthie's neighbors, because they did go to her neighbors to ask, had you heard anything? Had you seen anything? One neighbor told officers that an elderly woman lived in Unit 1109, but she always answered the door if she was home. So when the officers contacted the project office now a second time, the janitor indicated that there was no other key available for Unit 1109, basically said, I don't know what to tell you. We have nothing else to offer you. So because of this, officers made a decision to just leave the building. And this happened at 9:48 p.m. without ever entering Ruthie's apartment.
Well, they didn't have a search warrant or anything, so it's an interesting situation, right?
No, they didn't have a search warrant, but they had reason to believe that something bad was happening in there because, number one, the person who lived there said they're coming in through my bathroom. And number two, someone said, I hear gunshots and screams coming from 1109.
Yeah, that's true.
So the following evening, now it's Thursday, April 23rd, and police received a call from Ruthie's neighbor. This is Deborah Lastly. And she told them that Ruthie normally popped by her apartment on her way out of the building in the morning and then on her return in the afternoon. But that day, that hadn't happened. And she had noticed that officers were outside Ruthie's apartment the night before.
Huh.
So about 6 officers and 4 to 5 CHA security guards responded to Ruthie's apartment, and just like the night before, their knocks went unanswered. So while most of the officers, they did want to break the door down, the security guards were discouraging them from doing so, and basically saying that the tenant can sue you if you do this. So if they did break the door down, the officers would have to get someone up there to fix it because, of course, we know if it was open and vacant, somebody would come in and take everything that you could take.
Basically like, are you sure? Because if you do this, a lot of things are going to happen and it's not going to go back to how it was.
I don't know how somebody could sue, though, if you've gotten a 911 call that you're in distress.
It's all about legalities. I don't know. Yeah, I'm luckily not a cop, so who knows?
So just like the night before, yet again, they left without ever entering the apartments. So now it's the following day, 2 days after Ruthie called 911. It is Friday, April 24th, and Deborah Lastly, the neighbor, once again called. This time she called the project office with concerns about her neighbor. So a project official arrived at Unit 1109 at about 1 p.m. on that Friday with a carpenter, and the carpenter ended up drilling through the lock. Why they didn't just do that in the first place, I don't know. So as they entered the unit, they found Ruthie lying on her side in her bedroom in a pool of blood with her hand draped over her chest, one shoe on and one shoe off. And there were papers, magazines, and coins littered about the floor. So Ruthie had been shot 4 times, likely with a medium caliber gun. 1 bullet passed through her left shoulder, another through her left thigh. A 3rd bullet entered her abdomen and pierced her liver and then exited the side of her abdomen. And then the final and 4th bullet passed through her right upper arm, entered her chest, and severed her pulmonary vein. So medical examiner Dr. Upul Choi determined that her cause of death was from internal bleeding as a result of these gunshot wounds. So she wouldn't have died immediately, but because her pulmonary vein had been severed, Ruthie would not have survived very long. And Dr. Choi believed that even had she been taken quickly to the hospital, she likely would not have survived very long. So Ruthie was pronounced dead at Cook County Hospital at 4:35 p.m. on Friday, April 24th. This is nearly 48 hours after she frantically dialed 911 to report that somebody was coming through her bathroom. So sadly, murders and violence within the projects were very much commonplace, with as many, and I thought I read this wrong, as 2 to 3 violent murders per week during the warmer summer months. Violence escalated when it was warmer outside.
Yeah.
So because of this, a murder in the CHA project would not have been front page news of the Sun-Times or the Tribune. Ruthie had been one of 3 ABLA residents murdered that April. 2 days after her body was discovered, a 40-year-old man had been beaten to death by unknown assailants who used a stick, their hands and feet, to beat this person to death. And then 3 days later, a 25-year-old female had been stabbed to death by a 20-year-old resident of Ruthie's building, and this happened just outside of Ruthie's building.
Could you imagine living there and just seeing like the coroner or whatever ambulance coming through with another dead body like every single month? Like always, every month somebody's dying. Like horrible.
It's just not okay that people have to live in such fear, that children are raised in this environment, that it becomes normal, that people just get killed around you.
And like those people that grow up there, they just have no chance in society. I mean, not no chance, but they're definitely
uphill.
from behind. Yeah.
So Ruthie's murder was covered in The Defender, and this is a Chicago-based African-American newspaper. And in the article, police indicated that she had likely known her attacker since there was no sign of forced entry. But you'll come to find out there was no sign of forced entry because of how the people got in through You'll hear it.
Yeah.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret, with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
So it wasn't until June 10th when the Tribune did run a brief story after a second suspect had been arrested and indicted. So this was after detectives determined that her killers entered Ruthie's apartment through her medicine cabinet after they had removed the cabinet from the adjacent apartment.
Crazy.
They broke through her cabinet and climbed through the wall of her apartment.
That is so scary.
That is horrifying. So you're not even safe in your apartment when your front door is locked.
That's nuts, man. What are you supposed to like put bars over every single wall?
Well, you'll hear what people do. So the article made mention that Ruthie heard the intruders trying to break in and she called 911. That someone else called in a second time and reported hearing gunshots from the apartments, but by the time police arrived, everything was quiet and nobody answered the door, so they left. The story indicated that because of this, her body had not been discovered for an additional 2 days. So despite the fact that the details of this story were exceptionally chilling, the idea of killers entering this terrified woman's home through her medicine cabinet, it didn't captivate news editors. There were also concerns that despite receiving 2 911 calls, police failed to enter Ruthie's apartment that Wednesday night. Regardless, this was the last time Ruthie's story was covered in any Chicago daily newspaper, likely because the area had such a high rate of violence that people really were just desensitized, to these type of stories.
I can say, speaking as a former person watching the Chicago nightly news, that there'd be stories every single night of something happened in one of these neighborhoods, and it's like you can't identify. It's just like it's sad, and it's like every single night something's happening.
So horrible. So a janitor within the high-rises who wished to remain anonymous indicated that because of the ongoing horrors of what happened in the area, people just truly did. People even who lived there just became desensitized. And they really only worried about those that were stronger than themselves rather than those who were weaker. Somebody like 52-year-old Ruthie, who struggled with mental illness and she lived by herself. She would have been a vulnerable person. So residents indicated that over the past year and a half, people had been coming through units, entering through the medicine cabinet. Of the 10 apartments on each floor, 4 were especially vulnerable. Those that had a pair of units that sat at the end of each corridor and had back-to-back medicine cabinets. Those were the most at risk. So it was a horrifying reality that locking your front door was not enough to protect yourself. Some of the vacant units lacked a doorknob, thus they weren't even locked. And this made it just a perfect place for people to just squat or deal drugs or whatever. So an area known as the Pipe Chase, and this is a space that's 2.5 feet across. It ran between the medicine cabinets of 2 units to provide easy access to plumbing, should a leak be an issue. So it was designed that way so that if you noticed you had a leak, a plumber could easily come in and fix it without having to take the wall down. So the cabinets themselves were only secured by 6 nails, and they could truly easily be pulled from the wall. And in some areas of the building, a person could even climb vertically up and down. So it's not even that you were just at risk to the person that lined your medicine cabinet. Up and down, they could come through. And that just chills me to the core.
Well, like you said, it's not like when they designed this that they even thought about it, because who's going to be like, it's not like a jail where people are trying to it is, unfortunately, but it was a place for people to live, not supposed to be for people to get into everybody's rooms and do crimes and
Never. And, even the way that the buildings were designed that kept kept them isolated. It was meant to be more of like a green space, a place for people to gather. So when it was built, it was never pictured that it would be like this. So according to the janitor, gang members often occupied multiple adjacent units and they would just link them together. So it's almost like when you're in a hotel room and you have an adjoining door. Yeah. They had an adjoining medicine cabinet that people could just get in or out of. So a detective who investigated Ruthie's case indicated that the medicine cabinet opening is very small. It's only maybe 1.5 feet wide, with pipes obscuring the area, which would not allow any or many, I should say, policemen. So if you had a larger stature, like somebody like Mike's size, would not be able to get through this space.
I was just thinking, there's no way I'm fitting inside of a medicine cabinet.
Right. So it's that was a problem. So say somebody is in one of the units and they hear police at that front door, they simply slink through a few of the other units.
Sure.
So many people speculated that had the 911 calls come through from a location other than the housing projects, the officers would have likely forcibly gained entry into the unit that Wednesday night.
Well, yeah. And like as police sometimes say, like they're scared to go in those places because they can get turned on really quickly. It's unfortunate.
And residents were very scared and they learned, of course, that this was happening, that people were breaking in through the walls, through the medicine cabinet. So they began tying a rope to their bedroom door at bedtime. So they would pull their bathroom door shut and secure it to some nearby object. So now the bathroom is inaccessible throughout the night. So a lot of people would place a pail of water out to be used as a nighttime toilet. So basically the bathroom became off limits at night. Other residents positioned large pieces of furniture in front of the closed bathroom door at night to protect themselves while they were vulnerable and sleeping in their bedrooms. So Captain Raymond Risley, this is in regards to would the police have entered the unit forcibly had this not been in the housing projects? So this Captain Raymond Risley, an assistant to the superintendent, indicated that many of the 911 calls that originate from this location end up being hoaxes. So they do get a lot of false alarms. So some indicated that because of the elevators oftentimes being out of service with the lights broken, they said that finding a body in a day and a half is actually considered efficient. And that's just so sad to me.
Yeah.
So the high rises were built with a lack of through streets, originally to give residents more recreation space, to encourage people to come outside and visit with their neighbors, have barbecues, kick a ball around. But this really prevented anyone from driving through the development. And this ended up isolating residents and further removing them from where a policeman would pull in. So as gang activity, drug use, and violence only escalated, many residents remained housebound for fear of being killed if they left their homes. So picture somebody like Ruthie. She's vulnerable. She's only 52, but still, think of like an elderly woman that's living there. She's going to try to leave her apartment as little as possible because she doesn't want to get killed.
Yeah.
So you're going out of your home really only for necessity if you need groceries, that sort of thing.
What a terrible way to live.
It's really terrible. But because of this, many residents remained within the housing units for generations at a time. So there would be kids and grandkids, just like 3 generations of people living just down the hall from one another. So Ruthie Mae McCoy was known to her neighbors as Miss May. She was a mentally ill woman trying to survive within her CHA project. She was known to oftentimes dress strangely, curse at strangers, and wave a stick at teens who walked in her path. However, in the months before her murder, according to her neighbors, she had really truly turned over a new leaf and she had begun dressing decently. She was less ornery. She was even pleasant. Most weekdays, she left early, saying that she was going to school. So those within the projects who struggled with their mental health, they dealt with a double-edged sword. They were battling the demons within as well as the ones that were outside around them. So sadly, Ruthie was getting close to escaping the darkness and violence of her home, as 2 months before her death, with the assistance of Social Security and staff members at the Mount Sinai Psychiatric Center, she had gotten approval to receive Supplemental Security Income, SSI. So rather than receiving $154 per month from general assistance, she would now be receiving $340. She'd applied in September, and her first check was dated for February 10th, and it was for $1,979.
That's a lot for that.
It is a lot of money. So with this money, Ruthie planned to escape public housing. She had also purchased a new winter coat, some new clothing, and inexpensive household items. Ruthie's neighbors had been very observant, and they had noticed that she was wearing this new coat, that she had been seen carrying bags, purchasing things. What does this equate to?
Somebody's going to rob her.
She has money.
She's a target. Yeah.
So detectives believe that the killers invaded her apartment with the assumption that she might have some money stashed away. So tragically, the money that she was planning to use to make her escape ended up being the cause likely of her murder. So inside Ruthie's apartment, investigators found school worksheets since Ruthie had been diligently working toward getting her GED. So standing in the bathroom of Ruthie's apartment, one could see where the medicine cabinet had previously stood, which was by the time officers got inside, it was just an opening with pipes snaking down the walls. So her killers would have wriggled through the small space from neighboring Unit 1108. The cabinet in Unit 1108 had been taken as evidence, while Ruthie's medicine cabinet, it was gone. It has never been found, and it's unclear if it was in place before the killers broke in through the wall. So according to Vernita, this is Ruthie's daughter, 1 year earlier, burglars had also broken into her mother's apartment through the medicine cabinet, and despite the fact that her mom had reported the incident, no one from CHA ever reinforced the cabinet to the wall. So Margaret Barrage was Ruthie's former next-door neighbor from Unit 1108. She moved out in early April, and she recalled seeing Ruthie's cabinet leaning against her bathtub in the bathroom earlier that year. However, a CHA spokesperson maintains that there is no record to indicate in Ruthie's housing file that she reported a break-in or that she was having issues with her medicine cabinet.
Interesting.
So, on April 30th, 1987, a small service was held in Ruthie's honor on the south side, and she was buried in Homewood later that afternoon. So Ruthie had been born in Hughes, Arkansas, as one of 8 children, and when she was a young girl, her family relocated to the south side of Chicago in hopes of finding a better life for themselves. But sadly, the large family really did financially struggle, and they barely managed to scrape by. After a little bit more than 1 year at Phillips High School, Ruthie began to show signs of mental illness. When she was in her 20s is when it really started to emerge. So according to those close to her, it's unclear what she suffered from, but she would talk to herself and she would have sudden angry outbursts. So Ruthie's mother, she was very religious. She was a devout Baptist, and her siblings attributed what was going on with Ruthie as being spiritual explanations as to, how she was acting. So they believed that it was issues that were starting when she got out of God. So really what it comes down to is she didn't get the help that she needed. So Ruthie never married. She only had one child. This is Vernita, and she had Vernita when she was 27. So Vernita's father was not involved, which left Ruthie truly bitter towards men in general. So because her mom was institutionalized on a number of occasions as Vernita was growing up, she often stayed with relatives during her childhood. So according to Vernita, when her mom was diligent and she would take her medicine, she would do okay. But then she would take herself off the medicine, and then she would start to escalate and curse at strangers for no apparent reason. Vernita feared that her mom would say something to the wrong person, while many felt that because Ruthie stood at 5'11" and weighed 251 pounds, that she could potentially discourage people from retaliating.
That's a decent-sized woman.
So although she worked in various jobs for short periods of time, Ruthie's mental health issues prevented her from ever holding down consistent work, and she spent much of her adult life receiving financial aid, and she and Vernita lived in various housing projects. After Ruthie's basement apartment in Humboldt Park flooded, she applied for emergency CHA housing, and she was offered the place that she eventually called home. This is her 11th floor unit in Abbott Homes, the place where she would ultimately die. And she moved into Unit 1109 in May of 1983. So during the first 2 years at Abbott Homes, Ruthie shared her 2-bedroom apartment with Vernita and her 2 young children, Vernita's 2 young children, as well as Vernita's boyfriend. This is Louis Butler. But mounting pressures between Ruthie and Louis, were starting to rise. So the family moved out with the kids in 1985. So according to her neighbors, not seeing her daughter and her grandchildren sent Ruthie into a depressive state, and this caused her to become more outwardly aggressive and ornery toward her neighbors. She was often threatened and ridiculed, and police had to get involved on several occasions. However, for the most part, though, she tried to stay to herself. She lived in constant fear. She was fearful that she would be mugged or burglarized. So according to housing records, Ruthie had her lock changed twice by CHA, and she often walked along the 11th floor hallway turning doorknobs of her neighbors' doors. And then if she would easily open the door, she would lecture them about locking their doors. Living alone only escalated her fears, and this caused her mental health to further deteriorate. So during a winter visit from Vernita, she found her mom lying out in the snow making snow angels. While sometimes people would see Ruthie on a scorchingly hot summer day wearing a winter coat paired with several pairs of pants. So in 1986, Ruthie was taken to the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute after a healthcare worker suspected that she could have been responsible for pushing her 4-year-old grandson down the stairs, although Vernita indicated that she saw no signs of abuse and that maybe it was just an accident. With this, Ruthie was diagnosed with residual type schizophrenia, which is characterized by social isolation, bizarre behavior, vague speech, or odd beliefs. She was discharged and instructed to seek follow-up care at a nearby psychiatric center. So Ruthie started coming to the center 5 days a week, and doctors found indications of schizophrenia, but they saw that she was integrating quickly and her hygiene was good. Her communication skills were also good. So during her visits to the center, she was then starting to come 3 days a week. She was taking GED classes, arts and crafts, and group therapy sessions. And this really was doing her well. And she scored at a 7th grade level for GED placement testing, but proved to be a very bright student, and she rarely missed any of her sessions. And by April, she was up to a 9th grade level. Within 6 months, it's likely that Ruthie would have gotten her GED. So she was progressing very quickly. And like I said, neighbors were noticing right away that she seemed to be like a new woman.
That's too bad. It's like no matter what the time was, even if she wasn't improving herself, she was actively working on improving herself and going in the right direction and got that funding and was ready to get out of there, and just a little bit too late.
Oh, so sad. So adjustments in her medication paired with her interaction. So she is surrounding herself with these people at the center, and it was really helping her. She was progressing tremendously in the weeks that were leading up to her murder. She began to trust others because she hadn't. She looked over her shoulder all the time, and rightly so, because of where she lives. So she was starting to trust people. She was starting to form connections, something that her neighbors had begun to notice. She was dressing nicely, acting more appropriately, and for the first time, she seemed truly enthusiastic about her future and about her life. She spoke of her excitement in getting her GED and getting her life back on track. Ruthie remained very open about just how dreadful life within the Abbott homes was, and how she suspected that people were coming into her home and taking her money. She was noticing things.
And what sucks is because of her mental illness, people will be like, well, she's probably just seeing things or whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, everybody that lives there knows that's completely possible.
Right. So she wished that someone would come and live with her, since she hated living by herself. When she remained at the Abbott home, she wanted to move into a lower floor. So for a time, she knew she was just stuck there. So she would ask, can I please move? She would talk to CHA officials. She went and saw them for a transfer on several occasions, and this was something that she was never granted. So because her CHA apartment cost only $46 a month, which in 2025 is equivalent to $129.50, and with general assistance grant of $154 per month, she was getting to the point, starting to get additional money, but at that point, she still couldn't move out. So Ruthie's family suspect that the killers knew that she was home when they entered her unit. And this is likely a ploy because they wanted her to be there in case she had the money hidden somewhere that they could threaten her, maybe even torture her into telling them where her money was stashed. It is unclear if they even took any of Ruthie's money. Only change was located in the apartment. Had she, because we did, she had gotten money, almost upwards of $2,000. She was starting to buy the new coat and things like that. And she likely did not flee from the apartment when she heard them coming through her cabinet because she believed that someone was likely standing at the outside of her front door otherwise. So she truly felt like she was trapped in her apartment when she made that 911 call. So rather than fleeing, Ruthie frantically dialed 911 from the phone that ended up being one of at least 3 items that were stolen from her unit. So her phone was taken, her TV and her rocking chair were eventually found in a home of one of the 2 defendants' friends' homes, which we will talk about who these people are. Her phone has never been located. The phone was a puzzling detail, though, because if you think about the officers who responded to her front door, they asked the dispatcher to call Ruthie's line. They could hear the phone ringing through the door.
Yeah,
so
it
was still there at that point in time. So this suggests that maybe the killers were still hiding in her unit, or maybe they returned at a later time to take it because they still had another almost 48 hours to do so. So there's also been questions as to why the police didn't enter Ruthie's apartment on that Wednesday night, as well as why the CHA did not have the proper key to get into the unit. According to a CHA spokesperson, Ruthie had her lock changed on her own, something that was against the rules, and did not give the project office an updated key to reflect her new locks. However, her daughter Vernita does not believe that her mom did this. She doesn't believe she changed the locks at all. She believes that the CHA simply just mislabeled or misplaced her mom's key. And, there's 3 carpenters in all of the ABLA homes, and there are more than 4,000 apartments.
Yeah.
So clearly it would be very easy to misplace something. It's just a matter of pointing fingers. So Vernita went on to sue the CHA in 1988. So reports indicate that when a responding officer spoke with Ruthie's neighbors on the 11th floor, they claimed that they had not heard gunshots that night, likely fearful of being perceived as a snitch because you didn't want to be seen talking to the police officers.
You don't want to be on the map or anything, any reason to be looked at differently than everybody else. I just want to blend in, close my door, and not leave.
Not cause any kind of trouble because then you are going to be the one that is dialing 911.
Yep.
So officers argued that there are also a large number of hoax calls, like I said. So they thought, okay, maybe this wasn't a real call. We're not going to break this door down. So police went on to arrest 2 men in connection to Ruthie's murder. This is 19-year-old Edward Turner, who was arrested in his row house apartment a few days later. And then on June 9th, 25-year-old John Hondras was found hiding under a bed after police received a tip that he was in a 9th floor apartment of an Abbott high-rise, which was a block from where Ruthie lived. Despite the fact that Unit 1108, where the killers came through, had been leased and paid through May, the unit was vacant at the time, and addicts were frequenting this location. So the officers did not find any sort of drug paraphernalia inside, but you think about it, they had about 48 hours to take, any evidence away with them. Investigators found the medicine cabinets in Unit 1108. At that point in time, it was secure to the wall of that unit. Somebody could have easily put it back in place so that it didn't look like they had come through that way, where, like I said, Ruthie's medicine cabinet was gone, never been recovered. So again, they probably put the medicine cabinet back in place.
Sure.
So because of the sheer volume of criminals using the passageways within the walls of these high-rises, it was impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Edward Turner and John Hondras were truly Ruthie's killers. So both men were acquitted. And to this day, no one has ever been convicted of Ruthie's murder. So an employee of Ruthie's program was left chilled by the last words Ruthie ever spoke to her earlier that very day that she was killed, as she got ready to climb into the van that would bring her back to her high-rise home. She said, "I need help now getting an apartment somewhere else. I gotta get out of there." And those were the last words she spoke to this person, and she died that night. So by 2001, the Grace Abbott homes were condemned and began being demolished. And by 2007, they were completely torn down. And that is a sad and chilling murder of Ruthie Mae McCoy.
Yeah, super sad. It's just, like we said earlier, you just have a very, very small chance of making it out of those places as a successful, good person, member of society. It's like everything, the deck is stacked against you. You've got all these opportunities to be a gang member. And if you're not a gang member, then all of a sudden you're looked at as like, why don't you want to be a gang member? It's just so
It's
horrible.
a cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And it's sad. And just, I feel bad that the residents there had to look over their shoulder. They couldn't even feel safe with their front door locked and secured. I mean, you had to have been just like living in constant fear in your own home.
And hearing gunshots all the time. And police are always, even some of them, whether they admit it or not, you got to be scared going into those places.
I'm sure.
It's tough. And they were all knocked down. I do remember hearing about that. And it was just, obviously it was a thing that didn't work. So it's unfortunate. I don't know where low-income people were living
where
now.
they're living now. Yeah, I don't know. But it's just a sad situation. And since we're from Chicago, I just wanted to cover that case.
Yeah, interesting. Something like to think about. It's like, when you think you're down and out and stuff, it's like it could be worse. It could be a lot worse. You could be living somewhere like, not even paycheck to paycheck because she was, mentally ill and just had to rely on government assistance. And meanwhile, worried that somebody's going to climb through her friggin' medicine cabinet and come and murder her. And that happened, unfortunately. Is it possible that didn't happen?
No, it definitely happened.
Okay. And I can't believe they even found those guys. So like usually there's so many crimes that go around and like nobody's saying anything. Like how did they find them?
No, I mean, like I said, even Ruthie's neighbors that night were like, nope, didn't see anything because they're scared.
Yeah.
Everybody's scared to talk.
Can't blame them.
I can't blame them. No way.
Yeah, it's not. I'm just glad I don't live there. And I'm so sorry to anybody that had to grow up there.
Yeah. So anyway, we thank you guys so much for being here with us. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you listening, supporting us. I always say we just have an awesome group of listeners that are just so kind and supportive and wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for everything that you do. Thanks for listening to us. Tell all your friends, neighbors, coworkers about us. We're growing because of you. We get comments on YouTube all the time. Like, can't believe you guys don't have 2 million subscribers. I'm like, not yet.
Maybe someday. Fingers crossed.
Not maybe. It's happening.
Okay, I like that. I'm not a pessimist, but Mike is more optimistic, I guess.
Yeah.
I always have my self-doubts.
Which is what makes you fantastic, because you never think you're doing enough. Whereas I'm always like, yeah, I do plenty. I'm good, man.
I'm doing damn good.
You talked about like resting, and I was like, yeah, I can rest. I did a lot to work today. I'm good to go.
Although I did say at like 9 o'clock last night, I closed my laptop and I was like, I can hang my hat up. I did enough today.
Put your lunch pail back. All
Exactly.
good to go.
I'm clocking out.
That's right.
But you guys, we will be back on Wednesday for a bonus episode. So if you're starting to run out of content, we have you covered. We have more than 100 episodes over in our bonus content on Apple subscriptions or Patreon. We'll welcome you with open arms.
And if you've made it this far in the episode, you like us a lot, and we really appreciate it. Leave us a 5-star review with some kind words somewhere, whether it's Apple or Spotify or whatever.
But until next time, bye!
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.